Tomorrow, we'll have the national elections in a few months. So we thought this would be a good time to actually reflect on what do we expect from the representatives that we elect? What are the roles? What are the roles as members of the elected from the constituency, as members of the party, as people who are expected to think larger public interest, national interest, how do they balance these issues? And to some extent, and that's why the first session we thought it will be a good time to focus on that. Then we were thinking about, okay, we'll have the new Lok Sabha coming in May, June, and what can we learn from the working till now of Parliament, to the extent how can we improve its effectiveness in its various roles? What are the constraints that holds parliamentarians from being as effective as they could be? And the second session focuses on that. The last session, that's after lunch, we will be looking at state legislatures. States are, I think, way more important than the attention they get. Just one number shows that. If you look at the budgets, the cumulative budgets of all states put together is 70% more than the union budget. That states spend 1.7 times more than the union budget, which basically means that for every 100 rupees that is spent on us by the union government, 1.7 is spent by the state government on average. But our state legislatures are not functioning as well as they ought to, nowhere near as well as Parliament is doing. So we thought we should have attention on that. So that's the session for the day, schedule for the day. Without spending too much time, I'll request our panelists to come on stage. Couple of them are running late. Mr. Chavan should be here, I think, in the next 3 to 5 minutes. Mr. Sushil Kumar Singh is coming into Delhi by train, and some fog somewhere on the way, the train is a bit delayed. He said he'll be here around 10 o'clock or so. Ms. Lekhi should also be coming in here in the next 5 minutes. So may I request Professor Nirja Jayal to come here, and Mr. P.D. Rai and Mr. Ram Naidu to come on stage. So the first session will be moderated by Professor Nirja Jayal. I'm not going to spend much time introducing her because I think most people in the room know of her and of her work. She's a professor at JNU and has looked a lot about representation, citizenship, etc. She has written a book on looking at Parliament over the last number of years, came out about 10 years ago. She has also more recently written a book on citizenship. I'll just hand over to Professor Jayal to run this session.
Thank you very much, Madhavan. So this session, as Dr. Madhavan just explained, is about the role of members of parliament in balancing local expectations with national priorities. I will say a few words before I introduce the speakers, some of whom, as you can see, are yet to arrive. And after I have done so, each of the panelists will speak for 7 to 8 minutes, one after the other in sequence. And after that, we will try and have a conversation amongst the panelists, but also throw it open for some Q&A with the audience. So fundamentally, it seems to me that this session is about the representational role of the legislator. And since I am an academic, you have to forgive me a little bit of pedantry. I can't help but go back to the two influential theories of representation that have framed this debate for more than a couple of centuries. In, of course, the Westminster model, context of the Westminster model of democracy, but also beyond that. Our context only adds more complexity and demands more nuance in understanding this question. So what are these two sort of powerful framing narratives, theories of representation? On the one hand, there are those who believe that the elected representative should deliberate independently on national policies and is obliged to consult only her or his own judgment and not necessarily the wishes of his or her constituents. And this position is most famously associated with the conservative historian Edmund Burke, who in 1774, that's why I said a couple of centuries, in 1774 defended this position when he said, and I quote, "Your representative owes you not his industry only, but his judgment, and he betrays instead of serving you if he sacrifices it to your opinion." In other words, the exercise of his judgment is more important than the opinion of the electors, and if he were to follow the opinion of the electors, he would be betraying them rather than furthering their interests. Parliament, he went on to say, is a deliberative assembly of one nation with one interest, that of the whole, where not local purposes, not local prejudices ought to guide, but the general good, resulting from the general reason of the whole. In other words, what we are calling national priorities here. And in other words, the Member of Parliament knows best, and the local populace is really not competent to hold a view on the national interest. Diametrically opposed to this is the conception of representation associated with a radical notion of popular sovereignty. And on this view, the elected representative is an agent sent to Parliament by his electors to act on their behalf, to give or withhold their consent to legislation, to measures of taxation, and so on. And this is broadly what is known as the principal agent model of representation. I think today we all recognize that elected representatives can't do either one or the other. They have to do a bit of both. And that's why the theme of this session is balancing the local with the national, balancing the views of the constituents, the wishes of the constituents with what in the legislators' opinion and judgment is the national interest, right? So legislators today, elected representatives, have to perform necessarily both types of roles, intervening in parliamentary debates on, say, climate change, but not necessarily an issue on which their constituents might feel very strongly, but they also have to intervene in ways that enable them to more effectively represent the needs and the preferences of those who have sent them there. So we have specific questions for each of the panelists, but I'm also going to pose a couple of sort of generic questions within which these specific questions really are nested. And I'd sort of put it in two ways, not unrelated to each other. First, how connected were you, or how involved were you in civic matters pertaining to your constituency before you became a candidate for election? So in the conduct of your primary business, how do you think about your responsibility? Do you think about your accountability, rather? How do you think about your primary accountability? Do you think about it in terms of what your party demands of you, or what your constituents demand of you, and in case there is a conflict between these two positions, how do you negotiate it? And secondly, in the first past the post system, the MP is frequently elected by a minority of voters in a constituency. So as an elected representative, do you feel that the MP represents, first and foremost, those who have elected him or her, or the entire constituency, including those who may not have voted for you? How do you think about the people whose needs and interests and preferences you wish to represent? Right, so I will introduce all panelists, though some of them are not here. Is that all right, Madhavan? Yeah. Let me start by introducing Mr. P.D. Rai, the first speaker on the panel, a second-time Lok Sabha member from Sikkim. He's a member of the Standing Committee on Finance and the Committee on Subordinate Legislation, both extremely important committees. He has an engineering degree from IIT Kanpur, an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad, and he has been awarded the Eisenhower Fellowship. He's held various positions in Sikkim, including that of the Deputy Chairman of the State Planning Commission. Mr. Ram Naidu, on my left here, represents Srikakulam in Andhra Pradesh in the Lok Sabha. This is his first term in Parliament. He was elected at the age of 26 years. He's a member of committees on Home Affairs and Railways, and he has studied engineering at Purdue University, also has an MBA from Long Island University, both in the US. Ms. Meenakshi Lekhi is a member of the Lok Sabha from New Delhi. She is the chairperson of the Committee on Privileges and a member of the Standing Committee on Urban Development and Personnel, Public Grievances, Law and Justice. She's a lawyer practicing at the Supreme Court and also a spokesperson for the BJP. Mr. Prithviraj Chauhan is a former Chief Minister of Maharashtra. He has been a member of both the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. As Minister in charge of Atomic Energy, he had piloted the Nuclear Liability Bill. Currently, he is a senior member of the opposition in the Maharashtra Assembly. He studied engineering at BITS Pilani and at the University of California at Berkeley. And finally, Mr. Sushil Kumar Singh, who's on the train, as we just heard. He represents Aurangabad in Bihar, a third-time MP who was elected for the first time in 1998 at the age of 35. He has been a member of the Vidhan Sabha in Bihar as well, and is presently a member of the Standing Committee on Coal and Steel and the Committee on Privileges. He has an MA in Political Science and has been active in social work in southern Bihar. I think we may as well start because Mr. Rai has to leave for an important meeting in Parliament. So I will ask him to speak and put to him a couple of questions to get this going. The first of which is, since he is the only member of Parliament from Sikkim, how do you, I mean, sort of what are the challenges that you face in representing the aspirations of an entire state on the one hand, and on the other hand also championing issues like climate change, issues relating to all the mountain states of India, and so on. In all of these, I understand you have an interest. You've also been a member of the Standing Committee on Finance, and in that capacity, you've been involved with looking at various issues relating to the economy of the country as a whole. How do you manage to fulfill these diverse roles, given the fact that time is not plentiful and resources are not unlimited either? So I invite you to please offer your remarks. Thank you very much.
Can I speak from here?
Yes, please.
Okay. First of all, thank you, Professor, and I must thank PRS for giving me this opportunity to speak on a subject which is we think about a lot, but really, putting our thoughts together and then offering it in a packaging it and offering it to such an audience. I think it's something which we can all learn from, especially myself. Let me tell you, I traveled from Sikkim yesterday, and day before yesterday I had gone on almost a 4-hour or 5-hour trip to a very remote location. It's called a place which is known as Okare, very close to the tri-junction between Nepal, West Bengal, Darjeeling and Sikkim. It's a way out place, and we were at a height of almost about 9,500 feet. And it's very close to the forests of that particular area. And whilst we were having lunch, I was informed by some of the constituents that one of the major issues that we are facing out there is man-animal conflict. That place is very, very famous for seed potato growing at that altitude. And it's been like that for ages. But the problem is that the wild boars and porcupines have now started invading that particular area. And because it is largely the largest population out there are the Sherpa community. They are Buddhists, and they don't like to kill animals. Because I asked them whether there's any culling practice or anything like that. They said, no, we don't do that. And as it is under the forest rules, we just can't do it. So what has happened is about 25% of the population has migrated out of that place. I mean, it's just not possible for them to carry out even their livelihoods with that. And so the question posed to me was, what is it that you can do in this? And I thought to myself that along with the WWF and other such agencies, we've been exploring this particular issue in the mountains. It's not only here, but elsewhere as well, where human-animal conflict has become very, very pronounced. Hello. Welcome, sir. And and so, if it is affecting constituents the way it is, then obviously we need to do something about it. So this is in a sense the kind of juxtaposition of where constituents and have their say when a member of parliament actually visits them. I'd gone there obviously to meet members of my party, to find out what are the issues out there in the remote locations. We all know that that the parliamentary as well as our assembly elections are going to come together in 2019, and so the preparation for this particular issue for the elections is on. But in terms of where do we start, what do we do? I mean, the Professor Jha, right, Jaya has already put it very, very clearly that there is this kind of balancing that we have to do between national priorities as well as what our constituents say so. But in that, I would also like to factor in one more point, which is, in the case of Sikkim, we have the Sikkim Democratic Front Party, which I belong to and which I represent in Parliament through, has been at the helm of affairs for over 5 terms. And therefore, whatever the constituents want and whatever the constituents need is largely has been addressed by our party and our MLAs. But in Parliament, we follow a particular way in which, like we are part of the National Democratic Alliance, and we try and advance the needs of our constituents through that particular process. At the same time, if we have we are members of the standing committee, and so all these standing committees which have already been alluded to, we also try and see how best we can bring in the voices of not only the states of Sikkim, but say largely the northeast of India or the mountain states into the discussions that happen within these committees. And in Parliament, as we speak in debates or we take part in debates or in other any other ways in which we can bring matters of, say, public importance into Parliament, that is also done in a way in which we are able to represent not only the aspirations of the people, because largely we would know in which direction it has to flow, but ensure that some of that would find place in the public policies that may ensue. A good example would be a private member's bill on how trees, how it is to, how do we define bamboo as a grass rather than a tree. I mean, it's something which I'd taken up many, many years ago, and only last year, last year, the government took it on itself that we need to redefine it the way I'd done it, but obviously without giving credit to me, but you know, taking it as a bill. But during the debate, I made sure that that particular recognition was done. And Harshvardhan ji, who was the minister in charge and piloting the bill, actually said so during the debate, so it's there on record. But having said that, this is the kind of way in which we can, you know, say, address some of the issues that are needed, because bamboo is very much needed in the northeast, in the mountain areas. We can, you know, if we figure a way in which we can have access to these resources in a much easier way than through the Ministry of Environment and Forest, it would be so much easier to have downstream processing and, you know, value addition to such a valuable resource. But this is the way one can balance. But you know, there are lots of ifs and buts between whatever I've told you, because as we go into our constituents, you know, and start asking them, especially now that, you know, I'm a much better well area, but very scattered population. There are, you know, constituents do come to you and say, what is it that you can do for me? Like we would like, for instance, so therefore, a program like the MP LADS or the Local Area Development Fund that we have is just a very small amount, is something that we can meet the needs of constituents at a very, very, you know, in a very, very small. So I'd stop there and maybe, you know, just say that it is, I mean, there's also, there is a temporal issue. That is, right at the beginning of the term, you know, you can address many of the national issues because those come to the fore. But by the time you reach the 5th year, you're really largely looking at, you know, constituents and ensuring that, you know, you are able to be closer to them, obviously for, you know, so that we either get re-elected or at least the party gets the value for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That last point is really very, very important, and we should come back to it in our discussion later. Since Ms. Lekhi doesn't seem to be here yet, and she was listed next as our next speaker, I'll invite Mr. Chauhan to now speak. And Mr. Chauhan, when I introduced him earlier, I'm sorry I introduced all the speakers in their absence or presence, as the case was. You've been a Member of Parliament, you have been a Union Minister, a very distinguished one. You have been the Chief Minister of the state of Maharashtra, and now you're a senior opposition member in that state assembly. So you really have experience at every level, both in the assembly and in Parliament, and of course in government, of engaging with constituents, of managing their different expectations in various capacities. So we would love to hear from you as to how you have balanced the local expectations of your constituents at these various levels, both as a representative in the Assembly, as Chief Minister, and as a parliamentarian and a Union Minister, how you have managed expectations and how you have, as a Chief Minister, perhaps engaged with members of Parliament across parties from your state, trying to push issues from Maharashtra at the level of Parliament when you were Chief Minister of Maharashtra. And what, if any, are the constraints for a Member of Parliament, for a member of a Legislative Assembly in raising issues in legislatures? Are there different challenges if you're an MP? Are there different challenges if you're an MLA? You know, so I think you're best placed to give us a very wide-ranging perspective on this issue. So I invite you to speak, please. Thank you. As you wish.
A very good morning to everyone. I'm sorry I'm late because of some misinformation. As was very appropriately described, I have been in politics, active elective politics from 1991. about 19 years in both houses of parliament and about 8 years in both houses of the state assembly, out of which I had a chance to be an opposition member, a ruling party member, and also in the government. And I clearly bring my experience of Western Maharashtra. While I have been exposed to various other parts of the state as a party functionary, as the General Secretary of the Congress Party, my experience largely remains that of not Maharashtra, but Western Maharashtra particularly. And so you can factor that in when I make my comments. And as you know, Maharashtra is almost half urban. It's almost 50% people live and are governed by urban laws, another 50% live in rural areas. Like in our country, my state of Maharashtra also have rich parts and very poor parts. One thing that has starkly hit me in the last 8 years that I've been in state politics is that there's a total disconnect between what happens in Delhi, particularly Parliament, and what the aspirations of people at the grassroots level are. MP's role is strictly restricted to MP Lads Fund, and then very few times, and if you want a railway to run or a station stop to be created, and maybe since the sugar industry license was licensed and fairly controlled from Delhi, sometimes those issues. But otherwise, the priorities, the aspirations of the people at local level are quite different than what we would expect a vibrant democracy to have. Why is that? And that is obviously because you all know that there are huge developmental deficits and people just want to develop their localities, and perhaps MP Lads Fund is one small token. There is also a similar fund with members of the Legislative Assembly. And the connect comes through that. If you're visiting an area, then there is expectation that you will probably give some developmental funds for the locality. Now, what can be done really? Political parties are becoming less and less relevant, particularly coming from my area, which is quite sugar belt and quite prosperous. If a MLA for election is financially very well off, and that particularly means that if he's involved in economic activities like sugar cooperatives, milk cooperatives, or educational institutions, particularly medical colleges, then party becomes very, very secondary and important. If a party doesn't consider for a elective office, then it very easily hops across the next one, or the third one, or the fourth one. This is, I think, for our democracy, a serious challenge. If I address the Delhi issues, I think reporting of what we do in Delhi as a parliamentarian is completely unreported in the local media, be it print media or television media. Now quite every large city has a local cable channel, they run a news show of their own. They're completely not on the radar screen at all, except personally doling out some funds to MP Lads. But that needs to be addressed very urgently. How that can be done, there are various ideas, maybe we should consider some of them. One strong recommendation would be to televise parliamentary standing committees. That's very important. The relevance of what a member of parliament from my area goes to Delhi and does there is completely unknown. And my absence from the parliamentary constituency, not attending weddings or making condolence call, is a big negative, that you're not seen in the constituency. Where are you? What are you doing? So virtually it's almost a sin to go to parliament, to go to Delhi to attend parliament. Why are you not in the constituency, you missed out this important wedding, you missed out that important function, that birthday event. So if people know that you are really busy and doing something important other than parliament sessions, would be one important factor. If somehow we can make compulsory reporting of parliamentary proceedings in local media, maybe through some financial arrangements and all, that will also tell people that, okay, your member of parliament is working. In the long run, I think these development funds at your disposal are important. They do important work of addressing some long-felt needs of a particular area. But that directly goes against the planning process. I mean, should the DC or the collector not decide the priorities, or the local development official not decide the priorities based on the data which he has or which he has? Or should it be a discretionary decision by elected representatives that because this village voted for me, so I'm going to look after that village and not this village which did not vote for me? So in the coming days, we'll have to rethink about this MP led model. This will be anything, if any suggestion that we should do away with it, will be completely, you'll be shouted down in the assemblies, but I think it is going against the role of MP is defined as how much development funds you can extract out of the state government and how much can you get from your MP led funds, which are meager, as you know. And therefore, your parliamentary functioning, did you work at the international level? Did you make a international visit to further relations? Or did you work on some important issue like WTO or climate change or something like that? That is completely, today, not very relevant. Now, how do you bring that relevance? Of course, there are some national issues, railway or some typical things. It's a major project, but otherwise, it's not there. I personally felt that very deeply. In local areas, issues are first development, second jobs, or whichever you could put. Bringing industrial enterprises in your area, creating some local jobs, or trying to speak to some big MNC to make sure that people from your constituency are accommodated apprentices or given full jobs. That takes a huge amount of time for a local legislator. Other than that, I think there is also a need to create think tanks at the state capital level. We just don't have too many. And one of the things which I have felt very strongly, that in the electoral hustle and bustle, supposing one of the elections you lose out. The current system today is that you are completely discarded. Some parties make use of a defeated legislator or a defeated member of parliament. In the parliament, you work to keep them relevant. Otherwise, in current scheme of things, you are completely irrelevant, that you had to keep on, if you want to continue getting elected from the area, and had to continue on your own in the constituency for the next so many years, 4 or 5 years, whenever the elections are held. Now, like in the United States, if you can be parked into think tanks with some remuneration being looked after, minimum facilities of staying in a state capital or a national capital looked after, then these people who take huge number of years to come to a level, sometimes 15, 20, 30 years to reach a particular level, they will not be just discarded and eliminated. You can see the example of US, and almost every person, when one of the parties loses out, the people from the previous ruling party all accommodate in Washington or Boston or Los Angeles think tanks. And they are always ready to occupy cabinet positions when the next party comes into administration. This can be done. The second important thing we can do is to, and that is absolutely essential, is to create an office for a legislator in the constituency, and even in national capital if you're a member of parliament. That should be well-funded office with a good research assistant and good administrative staff, and some constituency person, contact person to look after the day-to-day affairs of the constituency. That I think sooner than later we'll have to do it. Finding place and finding people, how to recruit them, can be worked out. To begin with, I think we should at least compulsory parliamentary interns for parliament and for state assemblies. and we easily can find funds and find space for these small offices. Otherwise, there is totally a huge disconnect. Even local newspaper reporting, you see, is completely local, about 95% local. Sometimes some 5% national news is reported, if it's controversial. Otherwise, any positive reporting or positive is just ignored totally. I think in order to strengthen our democracy, I think some of these things will have to be addressed sooner than later. We'll have to make sure two more strong points that the party system is not, it's the personal finances that are really dominating today. Unless there is a big wave, in which case it doesn't matter. Otherwise, it's the personal ability, personal connect. And if you are well funded yourself, then you can also, on your own strength, private strength, keep a good contact in the constituency, keep offices. I know cases where a member of parliament, in Maharashtra we got 6 assembly segments per assembly constituency. Almost every assembly constituency there is a completely well-funded office for a member of parliament, which is not possible for an average member of parliament. If you can have a good well-funded office in one place in the constituency, that's big enough. So I think some of these stray ideas that I have, otherwise today the holistic connect between parliament member and the members of assemblies, and even going down to the lower level, is only appears at the time of election and not continue a 5-year process. I think we need to consider some of these. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for those, I think the suggestions about the media and about expertise, developing expertise through participation in think tanks and so on are extremely important. But you also actually addressed a question that I had raised before, Mr. Chauhan, you arrived. You actually addressed a question that I had asked before you arrived, so you didn't even hear the question, but you answered it, which was about, the question was about the first past the post system, in which you can frequently be elected with the minority of the votes in a constituency. So when you see your role as a representative in parliament, do you see yourself as representing everyone in the constituency, or those primarily who voted for you? So you, in a sense, answered that when you spoke just now. So Ms. Lekhi is now with us. Warm welcome. And I've already introduced you, I'm afraid, since we started a while ago. But as we all know, she's the Lok Sabha Member of Parliament from New Delhi and belongs to the BJP, of which she is also a spokesperson. Ms. Lekhi, you're dealing with issues in what might be, I would reckon, probably the most demanding urban constituency in India. Right? I don't know whether Mumbai or some constituency in Mumbai might rival that, but it does seem to be a very demanding urban constituency. And so you would be sought after by your constituents, even when, not just when Parliament is in session, but pretty much the whole year round. Given the peculiar governance structure of Delhi, which is, as a C state, a category C state, central government has jurisdiction over law and order, policing, and urban development. Then there's the role of the elected state government, and then there are the municipalities which are also elected. How do you negotiate, and as a representative from New Delhi, how do you negotiate these complexities and these multiple jurisdictions? We'd also like to hear something about your experience and the challenges that you may have faced as a first-time member of parliament, particularly as a woman member of parliament. And we know that there are far fewer women members of parliament than there ought to be. But what are your particular challenges as a woman representative, a first-time MP, and of course an MP on the Treasury benches?
I won't speak about challenges because I think there's no challenge which can't be met with. Every challenge needs to be met with, and we do it in the course of time. But the issues pertaining to the peculiarities of this constituency where you are all sitting, and we all think this is what makes New Delhi, because this is the kind of people you meet, this is the kind of people who hobnob with, this is the kind of people who dominate the normal discourse of this constituency. But the most unfortunate part is none of these people are the real voters. So New Delhi gets to be dominated by people who are not the voters. And they are the ones who are most demanding. But the voters, I usually say, I say there's always a black alley behind these Lutyens zone, which we all consider as New Delhi, and those are the voters. And you need to address their issues while you meet these kinds of people. So the structuring of New Delhi is, in that sense, not very homogeneous. It's heterogeneous mix of people. From international issues, because being a local member of parliament, all the embassies happen to be here. And laughingly I tell them, they say, we will vote for you. I say, yeah, I know, if you could. So none of those guys are actually going to vote, but people who work in those embassies as maybe grade 4, grade 3 people who may be residing here, even grade 2, grade 1, etc., will be living outside this constituency. They will be coming from Gurgaon, they'll be coming from East Delhi, they'll be coming from all over the place. So New Delhi, when people started talking about Swachh Bharat that 2-3 years ago, and everyone's focus was Connaught Place, because they said, you know, this is so terrible, this is so bad, etc., etc. I said, but how many lakh people across the country visit this place? And it's the job of municipality. We are trying to clean up. We have 3 shifts in CP. And with those 3 shifts, we are trying to clean up the place. But how do I deal with people who do not belong to this city? They just come and dirty the city. So on every issue, whether it's infrastructure or it's management, the multiplicity of various organizations is what you deal with constantly. And NDMC, by virtue of being an elected member of parliament, you become a member. So their day-to-day functioning, their meetings, their issues, employees who are working with NDMC, with CPWD, with various other agencies, are also residents in this area, and they are your voters. And then you're dealing with, you know, when I walk into parliament, from security officers to the members who are, you know, who are there, and others who are maybe the staff, are constantly handing me papers. So all my friends will laugh at me. They say, you are the, you know, councillor of this area. Because everyone will walk with the complaint कि मेरे घर के आगे से कूड़ा नहीं हटा, उसका railing टूटा हुआ है, the water supply is not right. All those things happen in this constituency. So even as a sitting member of parliament, your job is reduced to that of a councillor in any other constituency. And everyone says that approaching a member of parliament, even in this constituency, was quite an issue. But now somebody criticized me for being available, though I try my best to be available, because I think these people, Mr. Chavan said that there has been an infrastructure and developmental deficit which country across has seen. And people obviously in the capital of the city and capital of the country would be expecting better resources and better facilities. So they will approach whoever they can, who is visible, they will go to that person. And I don't blame them for that, because they've had no option all these years. If all the councillors do their job, if all the MLAs do their job, probably MPs will be less burdened and they will focus on their more academic kind of exercises, preparing for bills, participating in debates, thinking of policies. But unfortunately, that the infrastructural developmental deficit is what causes the difficulty. As a member of parliament, you need to do the job of 40 councillors and 10 MLAs. If those guys did their job well, probably the burden would be less. And one of the MLAs, because I was reaching for almost every road that got dug up due to the activities. So you construct a new road, 30 years, 35 years, the roads have not been relayed. people are complaining, so you get that done. The moment municipality does that job, the MLA comes and digs it up for laying the water line. And people are complaining, obviously people will be complaining. And you go there and you try to speak to people because you need to address, and then you say, look, this is not what I did. I got the road relayed, but this has happened because of somebody else's deed. And now for getting it recarpeted, we need extra funds, which we don't have. Our budget's over. So change in policy that whoever will dig will repair it also. But repair is never at par and is never the same as the road being relayed. You'll always see patches and you'll always get bumps. So people want you to address these issues. And when people want you to address these issues, because of the governance deficit, the role of MP gets complicated. Really complicated, because you're getting complaints. I mean, this morning somebody wrote to me, just this morning, the first message I see is that we have 16 inches pipeline. The MLA is laying 4 inches pipeline, which will not be adequate for the supply of water. Kindly see to it you get this sorted. Now tell me, how do I get this sorted? Though government, central government has tried to change the rules of the game by putting us on Disha committees. We are all part of district level committees in terms of infrastructure. But even after being part of that structure, it's the state government. You are the person who's supposed to be the chair of that committee. But that's not that's inadequate, because the DMs, etc., who need to ultimately get all the departments together, you get too busy with your job, and in Disha, the committee sitting will not happen. So while you are part of the, technically you are part of the infrastructure development committee, which is falling under your jurisdiction, but in reality, those things don't really happen the way they should happen, and the kind of controls you need to exercise. Half the time DUSIP will not come, and DUSIP I'm saying purposely because whole lot of people are sitting unauthorizedly in Delhi on land which was originally government land, for which government acquired a great deal of land on which they never worked. And the encroachment issues, even on government land, most of encroachment is on government land, for working and we are supposed to provide facilities for all that. And we are supposed to provide facilities for all that. It used to be with DDA, and I felt that if it was under DDA, it was easy for me to get things done. But they separated that and made it into a Delhi Urban Slum Improvement Board. Now, how do you improve a slum? It is a slum because there is no scope for improvement. All the rehabilitation policy. So I genuinely feel the role of an MP, which everyone must have read in college books and school books, etc., is very different when it comes to the ground. And even when you look at a complicated constituency like New Delhi, voter list is completely different from the kind of people you meet on daily basis. And whole lot of people who you would love to interact with or who look like you are the ones who don't even come for voting usually. They don't come for the voting. And of course in my election, a whole lot of them did vote and they did come. But the usual pattern is they are completely disconnected with the electoral methodologies, and they are only armchair commentators who would like to comment in their drawing rooms and never participate in the governance, usually. So these are the complications you deal with as a member of parliament. And being a woman, I don't think it has ever been an impediment. Being a first timer also has not been an impediment, because I may have entered parliament for the first time, but enough of work which backed me before I entered Parliament. So those were never the challenges.